This video is just for, it's kind of different. I guess it was about 7 or 8 years ago I wrote a book, and I tried to get it published, and it didn't work. I was told that I should probably self-publish. And I'm looking at the material today and thinking, I need to go back and redo this book because I've learned so many things, and I see some issues with the book. Definitely. I don't know that that's why it was, you know what it is? It's a monomyth. However, I know things today that I didn't know then, and I look at this and go, wow, I want to do some changing up of some things. I see some flow problems in mine. Anyway, this is chapter 1. It kind of sets things up, so it looks like it bounces all over the place. It does a few things, and there's a few things in there that I wasn't certain of if they should be in there, like I describe what a picket is on a mountain when you're climbing, or a few other things that my daughter asked me when she read it. She was like, what are these things you're mentioning in here, Dad? I don't even know what those are. So I thought I better describe those a little bit. In this copy right here, what I've just did is I've modified it a little bit. Those I read through this right here, I toned it down a little bit. I didn't describe it as, in as much detail. But anyway, I'm just checking for flow. This is chapter 1 of a... Boy, I've got to redo the entire thing, honestly. It's going to follow the same general thing. I don't have to start completely over, but I've got to go through and kind of rewrite a lot of stuff. But anyway, if you could give me your thoughts below, you're going to see right off the bat that there's going to be some similarities in there there's going to be some kind of spot on. I hate to cheat. I hate to give things up, but you're climbing Mount Anima. Anima is Greek for, it's what animates you, what makes you go. This person is going to climb Mount Anima. The only people that do it successfully are ones that do it solo. They can't do it in a group with others. That's the blind leading the blind. So there's all kinds of hidden stuff in here that I've tried to modernize so that it doesn't have to be. I think the stuff from antiquity is very difficult to access mentally. This is us. It's our path. This is my path. This is my monomyth. Now, of course, I'm using historical things from my past, but this is completely embellished. It's embellished. I've done some climbing, so I've got some experience with that, but I've never had a problem on the mountain. So anyway, thoughts, feelings, opinions, yeah, whatever. I'm fine with it. Appreciate it. Thanks. Hope you enjoy it. Meeting My Maker, a novel by Daniel Paulson. This is a monomyth. This story is based on a monomyth template. Chapter 1, Death on the Mountain. Curled up in a ball inside of a small cave high on the mountain, I shivered uncontrollably. I sat in the freezing darkness on the sharp rock floor, arms wrapped tightly around my legs and knees drawn up to my chest. I had lost so much blood. I was in deep shock. I had broken bones and was fatigued and freezing beyond anything I had previously experienced in my life. Who would have known a human could endure such cold and pain? I hurt like never before. My initial thoughts were how to get myself warmed back up. Well, knowing the fallacy of that, I thought maybe I'd be rescued. Then I remembered I already made sure I was someplace no one would ever find me. Near my end, I remember a passing thought that if I simply sleep till springtime, I'll wake up fine. By then, my wounds might be fully healed as well. Spring was only 9 months away after all. These were thoughts driven by fear, pain, and shock. I had gone from being scared to thinking crazy thoughts, and then to finally giving into my fate of experiencing my final moments alive. As the time passed, my shivering began to abate. It seemed as though my mind had become clear again. I could no longer feel my hands, feet, arms, or legs, and eventually realized I was no longer feeling cold at all. I heard my heart pounding, loud and slow like a bass drum. It sounded as if it had somehow migrated its way into the inside of my head. I began to feel calm as the shivering ceased. I had no comprehension as to just how close to death I really was. The last stages of hypothermia as one is dying are a clouded mind and a loss of feeling. People suffering from deep stages of hypothermia were sometimes known to do counterintuitive things, like taking off their hats and coats while they're right out in the snow and cold, because they don't even feel it anymore. Their mind tricks them. They stop feeling what is taking them out. In the end, you don't feel the violent shivering. That wasn't the fate reserved for me. I was too broken and had lost too much blood to even move anymore. I nevertheless wondered just for a moment, was I going to die from freezing to death or from bleeding to death? My grip relaxed and I fell to my back. The impact on the back of my head felt like a distant, dull thud. I lay there, staring upwards into the darkness of the icy ceiling of my soon-to-be mountain tomb. In the dim light, I barely made out the faint vapor cloud from my moist breath as I exhaled. I allowed my eyes to close and welcomed the warm, soothing feeling of eternal sleep. I accepted its peaceful comfort while it gently coaxed me to leave my pain behind. My mind drifted, devoid of my control. It was several years ago when I first began researching the climbing reports for Mount Anima. There was only a few stories of people coming back after having summited this incredible peak. However, after reading the trip logs and reports of the few documented climbs, I found myself incredibly puzzled about something. There were a lot of facts about this mountain which set it apart from others. For example, the only climbers who ever came back from the climb after making it to the summit only made it up and back if they were climbing solo with a guide. A single guide. I never came across a single documented trip report where climbing partners or teams had made it beyond deadly terrain features. When describing routes, it became evident that due to extreme conditions in a highly dynamic and somewhat volatile environment, no two people ever climbed this monstrosity using the same route. Strangely, it seemed as if everyone who successfully conquered this peak had to find their own unique path. Each one also reported they had faced incredible hardships along the way. Different from climbing reports from any other mountain in the world, the problems faced by Anima climbers who failed the summit always happened behind the climbers, not in front of them. That's what caused them to turn back. Also unique to the climbing reports, like I said above, if one reads enough of them, emerges a strange yet that common motif. Never has a team with a guide made it to the summit. Only solo climbers and their single guide have made it to the summit. That's it. I wondered if anyone else had ever noticed that. Well, anyway, most of the climbers had to quit before getting very far. I wondered how anyone was ever able to return alive and tell their tale. Well, I nevertheless felt compelled to give it my best effort. Solo people with guides have done it. I could do it without a guide, probably. I wasn't the mental or physical type of climber to willingly endure the hardships described by the others. I had no desire to die in pursuit of a mountain summit. It wouldn't mean anything to anyone except for me. Thing is, I loved the connection with nature when I was out there. I'm an introvert, and nothing makes me feel as good as the sound of the stream gurgling over the rocks as it slowly cuts the canyons deep. I feel peace down to my very core at watching the crackling flames of my fire as it flickers in time with the cool night's breeze, casting dancing shadows on the nearby canyon walls. I love staring endlessly up into the night sky, hours throughout the night, pondering the meaning of life and watching the millions of stars as they slowly creep around in an arc while the earth rotates in their midst. I've spent countless hours of my life snuggled inside of my nylon tent as the patter of a gentle rain lulled me in my sleeping bag into a meditative and peaceful slumber. I always found it pleasing to hear the distant yipping of the coyotes at night, late at night, just before they nestled into their dens for the evening. I felt a spiritual connection to the earth when I was out there. I think it's mainly by personality, but I've lived my whole life as, the epitome of the destination is simply the means for the journey. I always plan a climb and set my course. You want to have a destination in order to travel. But if I don't make it to the summit, the journey is never lost. There's no failure when one finds peace in their heart and soul. And after my tragic and abusive early years of life, I lived for, and in fact desperately longed for such peace. For as long as I can recall, I've always turned to the wilderness to find that peace and quiet. I planned to climb Anima solo and accounted for all of this right from the start in my planning and preparations. But I'm no risk taker. Backing away at the first sign of danger is a good way to stay alive. If you get to the top but die on the way down, that wasn't a successful climb. No one seeks that. Many find it nevertheless. But the weird thing is, everyone who soloed Anima reported they made it back down with incredible ease. I've personally measured my own climbing success by how much more I learn about myself on the climb. Those confusing and hurtful things from early years of life seem to always be ready to surface. I've been severely depressed and angry so many times over the years of my life. Getting away from society was a means of unplugging from the world. I always found a deep sense of peace in my heart and soul. I tried to hold on to that peaceful feeling a little longer each time I returned from a climb and re-entered civilization. But it didn't matter. In a day or so, the peaceful feeling slipped away, and I was back in the world of angry, screaming people and the blaring media that drives them. Head wound in a tizzy. Society and working life were a rat race to me. I'm always happy to leave them far behind for as long as I possibly can. That constant din of normal life is much more than background noise in my head. With my hard-wired, introverted, perceiving and sensing personality, I struggle to disconnect. I'm wired to be connected. It's just this jumbled carnival of a raucous cacophony echoing in your head. I'll tell you a funny story. I used to travel for work projects, and I'd get up early and arrive at the breakfast room in the motel before anyone else. This was frequently remote places. I would always change the channel on the community television from its personal slice of jaded news and onto the National Weather Channel. People insisted that the TV be on, so I can't turn it off. But you're going to be there with a bunch of other guests that want to watch this news stuff that's just going to wire your... But if I told the clerk I was working in the area today and needed to know the weather, well, that worked. Everyone can tolerate the weather as long as the TV's on. I like waking up and sitting on the patio to the sound of the birds or the rain. Anyway, by this act, I didn't have to wake up to the negative slice of horror so many humans are addicted to. I remember so many times observing the motel guests blindly staring at that TV screen, hypnotized by the daily report of political hatred, death, and some global destructive horror. News was all about those kinds of stories, and so many humans wake up to consume it, embrace it, and unbeknownst to their simple awareness, setting the tone for their day and left in place their entire life. The two had begun to exist in a complete symbiotic relationship. Horrible news hypnotized people. Hypnotized people became addicted to horrible news. I watched them shovel dainty meats blindly into their mouths as they fed both their gut and their neural pathways. They seemed unable or unwilling to tear their gazes away from the daily serving of something terrible, hateful, and often catastrophic as they lapped deep from the dividing trough of anger, judgment, and hatred. Daily, this routine would play out, wiring their brains for more and more of this very thing. Long forgotten to them is the reality that every day billions of good deeds are happening among people irrespective of religious beliefs, sexual orientation, nationalities, or whatever differences that are natural and only on the surface. Conditioned thinking causes so many people to create separation in their world. Somehow completely lost to them is the realization that billions of people every day do not get gunned down or blown up. Billions upon billions of people have and continue to die of old age. It seems to me that humans from all over the world are evolving into a massive communal fear and have no conscious self-realization that it's happening to them. They had become blinded to reality while angrily shoving their adopted fear into your face. And you don't dare try to calm it or balance out their one-sided view with a reality they could no longer see, perceive, or comprehend. No one can change it. I'm always eager to escape it. To me, the world seems full of simple-minded people. No, brainless idiots by the millions adding their negative energy to the very thing they purport to hate. They destroy opportunities for peace within humankind while screaming violently to my face what a stupid idiot I was, blind to their way of thinking. To them, I was ignorant of a world full of demons, killers, thieves, and lazy beggars, living off of the taxes of the working class. They screamed that they were the only ones who could save the planet from all the evil by destroying some version of those worthless people or fencing them out. I could never account for their small minds and narrow visions. We're supposed to learn to walk in each other's shoes. We all live on the same damn planet, after all. I once learned that the measure you mete unto others is the measure that will be meted likewise unto you. It was the Buddha's karma, and was also taught 500 years later from an Aramaic-speaking Jew. It was at once for me an easy thing to see. You can't deny the truth of it. You can witness it firmly in place in the world. Hatred and killing creates more hatred and killing. It's an obvious escalation towards the very thing many swear they don't want. Everything creates or begets more of itself. Whatever thoughts you feed in your mind grow to manifested fruition. This is an age-old lesson, seemingly lost to many of the modern masses. I don't know why it seems so simple to a few, yet completely foreign to so many. Many of those who carry those very words in its black leather-bound cover can't seem to understand it all applies to them too. They seem to exempt themselves from the lessons they don't wish to follow. And all of this brings me to how and why I came to climb this mountain. It had taken me months to prepare for this climb. I knew that I'd be able to get a good starting point by chartering a local bush pilot to fly me into a glacier at the base of the mountain. I'd set up my own base camp right near the drop-off point. The weather was predicted to be sunny. No immediate storms, and long-term global mountain weather forecasting said the entire region would be generally clear of storms for a few months this time of year. Well, I knew that I'd provided myself the best opportunity to succeed and be safe. From base camp, I'd start shuttling my gear and food to higher camps as the days went by. I would take my time acclimating to the high altitude and spending time taking in and embracing the serenity and pristine beauty of the mountains. I planned out a climbing schedule, but would only loosely adhere to it. I figured even if I was taking my time and being safe as possible, I could make it to the summit and back down to base camp in 40 days. Devoid of any cellular coverage out here, I didn't have a way to make a phone call, and I didn't want to fuss with carrying and powering a satellite phone this trip, so I simply scheduled the pilot to be there 3 days after my climb window to fly me back out. This would give me a few days of wiggle room in the event that I got delayed or just wanted to sit and contemplate and meditate some more before having to return to the bustle of the city. I had enough food and gas from my stove to last me an extra week. My schedule was flexible and relaxed. I had no reason to hurry. It was bright and clear as I watched the twin-engine plane outfitted with skis turn away from me. With a blast of aviation gas fumes and a single wave, the pilot throttled up, turned down slope, and in almost no time was lifting off. The powerful plane was soon a speck in the sky. In that clear, crisp air, I could hear the droning sound of the not-so-perfectly synchronized twin engines droning and fading away long after I lost sight of the aircraft. A smile and a light heart soon crept over me as I realized I was alone at last. I spent the rest of the day setting up camp and stashing my extra food and fuel. I buried it in 5-gallon plastic buckets with lids snapped on in the snow to keep opportunistic critters from helping themselves to the food. Ravens and foxes have their Native American trickster reputations for many good reasons, and they aren't all spiritual. It can be pretty disheartening to return to camp after a long day of climbing, only to find that your tent's been chewed full of holes and empty food packages are strewn across the snowscape with a gift of fox pellets to get you by. I marked their location with some long bamboo wands. These lightweight, strong poles had brightly colored streamers of colored duct tape wrapped around the upper end. That was to help me find them easily from a distance or in case of poor lighting conditions. Additionally, I marked their locations with my GPS unit, just in case unscheduled storms were to completely bury my wands. Well, that's a standard mountaineering practice. For the next week or two, I shuttled supplies further and further up the mountain. I always had my overnight gear with a few days' worth of food in my large mountaineering pack on my back. Then I would load up my sled and pull it up the mountain behind me. It was full of more dehydrated food, my technical climbing gear, tent, and most of the extra bottles of gas for my stove. I would take several days, first going up and establishing a new campsite within reasonable travel distance from the last one. After getting that camp set up, I'd stay there for the night and then return to the lower camp the next day. Well, this took a long time, but wasn't too physically demanding. It provided time for my body to acclimate to the higher altitude. I never was much for getting to the top as fast as I could. I would get nauseous in the rarefied air if I moved up to high altitude too quickly. The few climbing buddies that I have had over the years always referred to me as a load-bearing turtle climber. They wouldn't climb with me if they were in a hurry, but they did when they needed to get gear hauled. Day by day, I slowly gathered loads and took them ever higher. In this manner, I established a string of camps, all within fairly easy time and distance of each other. The camps were placed along the best route I could find within the huge terrain features. I stashed extra food, fuel, and a few additional supplies at each of these camps, too. I buried and marked the food and fuel in the same manner as my cache at the base camp. I planned on having lots of time on my hands, and this arduous but simple routine was something I enjoyed. I got to clear my head as well as my lungs. I was able to slowly and safely acclimate to higher altitude. My body responded physiologically to the rare air by producing more and more oxygen-carrying red blood cells from my bone marrow. That's how you acclimate. I moved as a tiny speck within huge features, which always reminded me just how small a human really is. It was on day 8 when the climb suddenly took an extreme and violent turn. The terrain had progressively become steeper and more complex. The upper glacier travel was dangerous with the potential of falling into huge cracks in the ice. These cracks are called crevasses, and they range in all manner of sizes. Some are narrow enough that you can just step right across them or leap over them, while many others are big enough to hold a skyscraper. Cautiously standing near the edge to peer in always took my breath away. The solid walls of blue ice just below me seemed to radiate cold air from deep within its hidden depths. I felt like I was standing at the very edge of a huge frozen ice canyon. I moved along slowly as I ascended. As part of my safety gear, I would plunge a long, thin, collapsible aluminum probe into the snow in front of me before each step. That was to check for snow bridges. A snow bridge is made from the snow from a recent winter. During freezing conditions and heavy snowfalls, a thin shell of snow builds up over the open crevasses. This layer hides the crevasse and makes it look like you're just walking across flat snow ground. It hides the extreme danger. It's like walking over a blind canyon across a tissue paper bridge. It's not going to hold you up. The mountain had been largely quiet as the days passed by, but occasionally there were a distant rumbling sound as melting ice broke away in huge chunks, avalanching its way violently down the mountain. I kept a wary eye on that process and was continuously ready to vary my ascent in order to stay well clear of any potential avalanche activity. It was about mid-afternoon that day when I stopped for a much-needed break. I had to eat quite a bit because I was burning so many calories. My first order of business at each stop was to pound a picket into the hardened icy surface. A picket's a T-shaped bar a few feet long and made from super strong, very lightweight aluminum. A climber uses a picket to create an anchor and tie off to when you need it. Next, I used my ice axe's sharpened adze head along with the stomping down on the snow with my huge mountaineering boots. They were outfitted with steel crampons to chop out a small ledge to sit on. This was very hard, steep, and icy slope. Finally, I unshouldered my pack. Then using my ice axe, I put the long handle through the pack's haul loop and plunged the axe handle down into the snow. This anchors my pack just below me for easy access to the top compartments. Once I get free of my sled and pack, I feel light and nimble. Using an extra piece of nylon webbing and another carabiner, I clip my own harness into the picket anchor point. I don't need myself careening downhill in case I slip or lost my footing. Finally, after getting myself anchored to the glacier, I pull on my big puffy jacket to stay warm while I sit and rest. Perhaps 20 minutes passed by while I prepared my ledge and got myself secured. At last, I was sitting on a butt-shaped impression on the snow looking down slope, admiring the grand vista on that beautiful day. I had my small gas stove set up with a lightweight titanium cooking pot on top. I would fill that pot with snow and melt it down for drinking water and to reconstitute a dehydrated meal. There wasn't a single cloud in the sky. In our winter mountain vernacular, we refer to this as a bluebird day. The air was freezing cold, all right, but the radiant sun was nice and warm. The snow on the gas stove melted in short order and soon began to boil. I poured some of the hot water into a dehydrated package of macaroni and cheese. About half of my meals were mac and cheese. They were super lightweight and were calorically dense for their weight, and pretty easy to prepare. It would take about 20 minutes for the package to rehydrate, so I sealed the Ziploc top and set it off to the side. I poured the rest of the water into one of my water bottles and then filled the pan with snow again to melt some more. I would boil up a few of those pots full to top off my fresh drinking water supply. As my lunch gradually rehydrated back into something edible, I lay back and took a deep breath. I was happy to be here and was excited about the climb. I took in the vast and beautiful panorama. I could hardly believe I was so lucky to be here. I closed my eyes for a few moments, allowing my thoughts to fade. I heard the hiss of the gas stove. I felt the cold but gentle breeze across my face. I was drifting close to sleep. Mental images swirled in my mind. I seemed to be floating in some mental netherworld, where images of the past danced in some macabre dance that makes you feel turmoil and fear, even though it's all inside your head. As I rested there, I began to see photo-like images of my earlier days in life flashing through my imagination. I don't know why that happens. Sometimes my head just does that, and I'm not in charge of it. These flashed quickly in my mind like a slideshow. I saw a belt. I saw crying children, welted. I saw a piece of rope, my brother's casket. I saw a bottle of wine. I saw black and blue. I saw a lot of pain that I wanted to leave behind. The images won't stop, but I don't want to see it. I don't want to look at it. It hurts. Suddenly, there was a loud but distant boom, followed by a low rumbling behind me. It snapped my attention back to the mountain. Boy, I was glad to have been tied in. The sound was so loud and close-sounding. I jumped from being startled out of the mesmerizing silence and flashing images. I sat up quickly and slid a little as I spun my head around. I jumped right up to my feet. This wasn't the kind of sound followed by rumbling you simply hear in the distance. This was much larger than the avalanches I've been seeing over the past few weeks. This one was so big, I felt it vibrating the ground under me while I stood there. I could even feel the rumbling in my chest. The spray of debris in the air far upslope and way over to the right told me exactly where the avalanche was. I quickly made an assessment of the action and watched intently to mentally plot the course of the debris heading down slope. On high alert, I continued to sweep my gaze from the avalanche high up and to my right over to straight up from me and back again. I was making sure nothing directly above me was coming loose. It took only a second to determine this avalanche had originated in the serac field below the glacier to the basin in my right. Seracs are huge chunks of ice that slowly form out of the base of a creeping glacier. They can stay put for years, but they eventually break out without warning. That's what was happening now. I smiled to myself, feeling every bit proud of my mountaineering savvy. The smaller of those blocks were the size of semi-tractor trailers, while larger ones reached the size of 3-story buildings and weighed many tons. They'll take out anything in their way. I continued to watch as the tons of ice and rock began to disappear out of view over the ridgeline, far above and to the right of me. I felt somewhat isolated from it, but not off guard yet. The ground continued to tremble under my feet as the huge chunks of ice and rock continued their high-speed downward path. And though I couldn't see the bigger chunks beyond the adjacent ridgeline to my right any longer, the volume of the sound did not diminish. It stayed loud. I continued to watch intently as the flow continued down and what I presumed was away from me. However, it was getting louder, and the rumbling was becoming more intense. Looking around, I was suddenly very nervous and feeling a sense of urgency. I can't explain why. It was in my gut. Perhaps it was because the rumbling I felt in my chest continued. Perhaps it was instinct. I kept a watchful eye on the rocky ridgeline to my right. I knew the avalanche was gaining momentum and becoming more powerful. Soon, it was at terminal velocity. This particular event was far bigger than any activity I had seen so far. It was so massive. In a moment of trepidation, I took a step downhill, caught a crampon spike, tripped, and fell backwards, sliding about 10 feet till my webbing lanyard attached to my picket pulled taut and stopped me from going further. Chunks of rock and dirty ice had suddenly begun to shoot over the ridgeline from my right. It hurled across the mountain, heading to the left at a high velocity, about 3,000 feet higher up and directly above me. I don't know what the flow impacted or how the terrain outside of my field of vision redirected the massive slide of rock and chunks of ice, but it had somehow become diverted from its original downhill course and was now crossing at high speed over the ridgeline and making a fast horizontal run across the slope straight above me. I knew instinctively once its horizontal motion slowed, it would quickly succumb to gravity, arc back downhill, and take me right back off the mountain. I knew I didn't have much time to get out of the way. Small bits of rock and ice had already begun to pelt me. Getting to my feet as fast as possible, I tried to bolt across the glacier. In less than 2 steps, I was spun around, yanked off my feet, and slammed back to the ground. Confused, I wondered if a big chunk of ice already came this far and hit me. In another second, I realized I was sliding in an arc right back to my cargo sled. I was still clipped into the picket. Trembling with fear, I managed to unclip the carabiner from my harness and got to my feet again. As I bolted away from my secured gear, I was never consciously aware of touching the ground. Adrenaline surged in my veins and flight mode was fully engaged. I didn't look back, knowing I stood no chance of survival if I stayed there. If I couldn't get away, I would be smashed, pulverized, and ground to pieces. The only thing I had in my favor at that time was my ability to move, fear, and adrenaline. In a few more seconds, small-sized chunks of ice and rock began pelting my legs and back. Suddenly, I was in the forward edge of the tons of cascading ice and rock debris. It had slowed, and succumbing to gravity, it was now coming fully down my glacier slope. A much larger chunk of ice struck me on the uphill shoulder and staggered me. Though I thought I moved far enough to escape certain death, I was not able to escape the onslaught of feet-deep ice, rock, and debris, which was soon my surface to run on, as it slid down slope at an ever-increasing speed under me. I was moving at full speed, but that thick sheet of debris that I was somehow still running on top of was taking me downhill at a faster and faster pace. It was like I was on a monster conveyor belt of debris, which was taking me in the wrong direction. I managed to stay upright at first. My feet barely touched each time I took a panic-powered stride. But I quickly lost my footing, tumbled, and was heading downhill in a sitting position. As crazy as it was, I somehow lucked out, managed to get near the far edge of the glacier, and it seemed as if I had at least garnered some control of my fate. The avalanche material was now dense enough to remain on top of. I was able to continue to shift over while moving in a crab-like manner and rolling and tumbling, whatever I could to stay in motion as I desperately moved further to the far edge of the glacier. Just ahead of me was this jagged ridgeline. It's called an arete. It's made up of a band of rock jutting upward between 2 glacier basins. I suddenly had the idea that if I could scramble off the top of this sliding pile of debris and get on top of that arete, I could scramble to a high point, thus getting myself free of the worst of the danger. It didn't work out like that. As I was able to tumble and roll myself closer to the far edge of that slide, the less dense the slide material had become. I was able to get back to my feet, and that seemed very hard and accidental. The steel points of my crampons secured to my boots didn't slide, and I ran again while continuing to almost trip up. I was pitching forward, trying to get my feet to move faster, but I was leaning too far forward. I couldn't get my feet to move fast enough to stay under me. I tried my best to high-step through the mass, but everything was so unstable. The variety of sizes of rock and ice careening underfoot made it impossible to run on with any consistency. My crampons were catching the edges of rocks and twisting my ankles and knees as I plunged ahead. A large chunk of ice smacked the uphill side of my right leg just as it was swinging through an arc as I ran. That tripped me up and simultaneously caused me to drive a toe spike from my right crampon deep into my left calf muscle. I knew in the instant I felt the burning pain this was a violent puncture. But that didn't concern me just then. With the toe of my right foot suddenly spiked into the back of my left calf, I was sent crashing into that head-first downhill dive. I instinctively reached my arms out and turned my head to the side, hoping to minimize impact damage to my face. I was launched straight ahead into the sliding mass of the edge of the debris. In this less dense pack, tumbling again, I became part of the flow. Sliding and tumbling, I had now completely lost control of my ability to guide myself in this mess. Impacting rocks, bruising, the puncture of my calf itself were barely felt as the adrenaline continued to surge, and my shock and fear were still pulsing at an all-time high. The icy edges along the side of a glacier melt away from the sun-heated rocks along the arete. This leaves a large vertical gap between the ice and the rock. This gap is called a moat, and this one was big enough to drive a small car through. And despite any efforts to avoid it, that's exactly where I ended up. Sliding, crunching, tumbling. I was getting beat up in this large crack between the solid ice and the solid rock as the chunks from the avalanche began to fill it up and sweep me along. I now began to feel pain in every part of my body. This had been going on for so long now that my surge of fear-induced adrenaline was by now depleted. I had gone limp, fatigued and hurt, finally simply allowing myself to be swept along. My face had been smashed and I tasted and felt warm blood. It was at this moment when I first considered, I'm going to die. I wasn't able to control my fate and I knew it. Closing my eyes, I continued to tumble, feeling as though I was being ground to shreds. My legs had become tangled and twisted. I felt an incredibly solid hit on the top of my head as I was somersaulted headfirst into a solid rock mass. My climbing helmet cracked from the impact and was suddenly torn away. I felt that hit only for a tiny second down my neck and spine. Then darkness, as I was completely knocked out. When I regained consciousness, it took a while before I could see around. I could only get my left eye opened, and then only part way. With a shaky hand, I reached up to feel my right eye. It was plastered shut with something. It slowly dawned on me that my eye was being held shut from my own dried blood. It was dark outside. I felt the cold wind flowing downslope over me. I surmised that it was late into the night. How long had I been out? Hours? Days? The diurnal winds would shift throughout the day. It will come upslope as the daytime sun heated the air in the valley below. I always pretended the atmospheric convection currents pushed me uphill as I climbed. During the night, as the temperatures plummeted, the air would flow back downslope. That cold downslope wind is what I was feeling. I tried to sit up, but intense pain racked my every bone and muscle. I felt weak and very cold. I knew I was in severe trouble. I felt very alone and couldn't assess how badly I was hurt. But I had enough sense and wits remaining to know I was not going to be okay. My head hurt more than anything. I painfully gasped a deep breath and sat up a bit straighter. I tried looking outward and downslope, trying to see where I was. In the darkness, I could only see faint black and white. Hell, I was in rocks and snow in the dark of night. Black and white was going to be it. I pondered my life. I wondered if I had done all that I wanted to. I wondered if I had wronged anyone and never made restitution or asked for forgiveness. I wondered how many people I hated yesterday, but would embrace at this very moment as my very own life, now hung on a balance. I wanted to be in a sitting position when my remains are found. I was somehow thinking that would signal to the world that I had gone with some kind of dignity. Wincing in incredible and sharp pain, I eased myself, inch by inch, backwards. I was looking for the rock wall behind me to lean up against. I kept inching and felt nothing. Sobbing now, I stopped and put my head between my legs and vomited. Moving backwards by mere fractions of an inch at a time, I thought I felt the ground behind me beginning to slope downward. I paused, eyes closed, excruciating pain racking my whole body, hunched over as a completely broken man. I was drifting away from consciousness again. I tried to roll over to my side to curl up in a fetal position. Instead, I imagined a falling sensation, then felt the dull pain as I impacted the bottom of a hole. I had fallen after all. What was real and what was in my imagination had become difficult to distinguish. I was fading. Struggling, I get to all fours. I slowly and painfully swept my left arm around in front of me to find something to lean against in the darkness. I felt nothing. I inched forward, knees screaming painfully as they meet sharp rock. I did this a few more times, but soon realized it was no use. That's when I rolled over and did my best to sit up, wrapping my arms around my bloodied legs and torn garments. That's when I settled in to die. The shivering had stopped. The pain was gone. The fear was gone. My pounding heartbeat had become quiet and distant. I actually imagined that I felt good. I allowed a smile to come over me as I now accepted the fate over which I had no control. It was my time to go. My awareness slowly diminished as the darkness moved effortlessly into my mind. I embraced eternal rest as it wrapped me in warmth, unlike anything I had ever known. I welcomed its ease, peace, comfort, and loss of memories.